Hello! In today's video, we're going to get 525 watts of solar energy installed in the roof of my van using 3 of these 175 watt solar panels from Renogy. Now, before I fix all 3 of these panels to the roof, thus giving me no access whatsoever, while it's still open up there, the first thing I'm going to do is attach this cable gland. This is a relatively simple installation, simply requiring a hole in the driver rear side of the van. Just watch out for sharp metal shavings raining down into your hair when you do this, and then follow that up with the usual processes of filing the sharp edges to protect the cables when they're passed through, give them a little bit of a sand, maybe just to round it off slightly more, and then finally protect it from rust under a layer or 2 of primer. Now, I don't think this is needed, but I had some Sikaflex Primer left over from when I installed the windows, which, by the way, you can watch in a previous episode. There's a link in the top corner now. And I figured that while Sikaflex on its own would be perfectly suitable, what's the harm in putting a bit of primer down first? I also just really like applying this stuff. And by the way, there's links to both of these in the description, as well as everything else I'm using in this video. And next, I gave the entire roof of the van a really good scrubbing. This is something you want to be pretty pedantic about, because using the method of installation I'm about to show you in this video, there's no way of getting under these panels once they're installed. So we're going to be fixing these solar panels into the roof using these, which are called Z brackets or Z brackets, depending on where you're from. It's pretty simple. They just bolt to the underside of the solar panel and then screw through the roof of the van. So to begin with, I got these attached to one of the solar panels and then took it up onto the roof, praying that I got my measurements correct. Let's see how well this goes. Okay, so it fits perfectly between the 2 skylights, which, I mean, I measured it so many times, but it's still really relieving. The only thing I'm worried about is that if the solar panel is in this area here, that means that the brackets are somewhere above one of these ribs. Maybe not perfectly, but there is a risk of when I drill through, going into one of those. So to figure out where these bolts are going to come through, I'm going to use these bump outs on the roof to reference the outside to the inside. So for example, I've got these 2 bumps here and then a seam down the middle. I should be able to see that on top. So I can measure from the center of that out to the rib, and then I should be able to see on the roof whereabouts this thing is. So from the center of the rib to the middle of that bump out is about 155 millimeters. The camera's perspective is a little bit off, so 155 is what we'll call it. And the rib itself is, 2 inches. And then the one back here between these seams is 170. Yeah, about 170 from that seam to the middle of the rib. So let's see. I can see the seam is just under there. Okay, so I can see this is going to be pretty close to the middle of the rib, which is there. So I'm going to try and shift it back a little bit. That means the holes are about 250 millimeters from that seam. We'll just check that inside. Seam is there, 250. Perfect. Okay, so we've cleared that rib. Let's check the other one. So just to double check, it was about 155 from the middle of that dip. Okay. This method of measuring by using the corrugations on the roof was somewhat rudimentary, but it did work pretty well. However, later in the video, you'll see that I found a much more accurate method of doing so that I found to be far more accurate and trustworthy than using these corrugations. I think we're there. I've seen people install these solar panels by simply driving self-tapping screws through the roof of the van, which while it might have worked for them, it didn't really instill a lot of trust in me. And so I was planning on bolting these in position using Rivnuts. Very much the same process as what I used while constructing the bed in my van, and as I said before, was really careful to brush away all of the metal filing so that I didn't have any issues with rust later. Here I'm applying Loctite 638 to each of the Rivnuts before inserting them, which is a retaining compound that prevents components from rotating against one another. I had some of this left over from the tools I make, and I did it while installing the bed as well, but many people pointed out that it's not really going to make much of a difference, because effectively all I'm doing is bonding the Rivnut to the paintwork of the van rather than the metalwork of the van itself. And so while there's no harm in it, it's probably not needed. Just make sure to install the Rivnuts correctly and you should be absolutely fine. Now, I went pretty mental with sealing these because this is a lot of holes in the roof of the van, any one of which could spring a leak at any point, so I wasn't going to take any chances. The first step was to apply some sealer around the outside of the Rivnuts, and then I also put a little plug in the end just to be sure, but not so much to gum up the thread. Back to the roof now. I made sure that the brackets were securely fastened to the solar panels, and then applied a bead of Sikaflex around the bottom of each of these brackets where they would meet the roof of the van. This both had some adhering qualities as well as sealing the threads from the outside to prevent rainwater from finding its way to the sides of the threads. And then finally, to top off my three-pronged approach at sealing these rivnuts, I applied some PTFE Liquid to the outside of the threads before screwing the bolt into place. This now meant that the rivnuts were sealed from the inside of the van, the sides of the brackets, and above the brackets as well. And so that was how I installed the first solar panel, which overall went pretty smoothly. Now we've got to install two more, and I figured out a slightly different method of marking them out to ensure I missed the ribs inside the van. Alright, so for the remaining two panels, it's pretty damn tight, but I think I can do it. I've actually found a really good way of lining these up. On the roof, in the gutter, you've got these like circle disc thingies, and they're spaced about every 400 millimeters or so. Those correspond to these thingies on the inside of the van. No idea what they're for, but they're definitely the same thing. So I can reference the location of the solar panels on the roof according to the circles and see exactly where, well, close enough where it's going to come through on the inside. So let's see, at the current location, in line with the max fan when it's closed, these are pretty much in line with that circle. So let's have a look. So max fan, this is the rib, and then that is the circle there. So we are completely all clear along here. So from that circle, we're looking at about 55, 60 mil. That's the one next to the door. So that one, it was plenty of room there. 55 or 60 mil. It'll be roughly around about there. 740. So the spacing is 740. If it ends in line with the circle there, where's that going to put us? Right in the middle of the rib. So if it goes about 35 mil next to it, should get me clear of the rib on that side. 740 mil from there. As long as it doesn't interfere with the fan, that should be all good. This turned out to be far easier, more accurate and predictable, and is definitely the method I'd recommend for installing these if you're going to follow this method. But by this point, I was just internally celebrating that these actually fitted on the roof of my van. These are three pretty big solar panels which are installed on a roof that already has 3 skylights in it. And so really it's a miracle they all fit, and is a testament to putting a lot of planning in before cutting a single hole into the roof of the van. And so with them all spaced accordingly, it's exactly the same process as before. Mark all of the holes, making sure to avoid the ribs on the inside, drill them out according to the rivnut you want to use, seal the absolute living shit out of it, and then get them bolted down nice and securely, being sure to seal the threads with a little bit of PTFE liquid as well. Again, there's links to everything I used in this video in the description, as well as the solar panels themselves. I really liked installing them, and they're very highly rated by other people as well, so be sure to check them out. Alright, so it's now the next morning. We've got some pretty heavy rain going on outside, and there is not a single drop coming through any of these rivnuts. So I'll be keeping a close eye on them throughout the rest of the day, but I'm pretty confident we got it watertight. Now, as for this installation method, would I recommend it? No. While this method is very secure, not only is it quite difficult to get into position in the first place, but also it's not very future-proof. If I have a problem with any of these solar panels, I'm going to need to rip up all the sealant. I'm going to open up holes in the roof of the van that I'm going to have to then plug from the top temporarily. And then when I get the new solar panel in, I'm going to have to get the brackets located above the existing rivnuts perfectly. It's actually going to be a little bit of a nightmare if one of these or all of these don't work. So for this reason, I wouldn't recommend this method. I'd recommend taking a look at the people who have installed it using a U-channel and brackets and stuff like that, because it looks far easier to install and it's very future-proof as well. But overall, I'm very happy with the installation. If I do have any issues down the line, that's an issue for future Matt. Present Matt is very happy with it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to press the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.